The story is called My Parents Left Me to Bleed Out so they could celebrate my brother's success. Now they're the ones losing everything. I've been carrying this stuff inside for a long time, and I figured Reddit might be the right place to finally let it all out. My name's Derek, I'm 30 years old, and I used to run a small custom motorcycle repair shop. Well, technically I still do, but that part of the story comes later. I grew up in Bristol, Tennessee, and honestly, growing up there was rough. Not because the town itself was bad, but because of what life was like at home. I have a younger brother named Tyler who's 3 years younger than me, and in my parents' eyes, he could do absolutely no wrong. To them, Tyler was perfect. Our entire house basically revolved around him like it was the Tyler show running 24/7. The living room looked more like a strange little baseball museum than a normal family space. His trophies were displayed everywhere as if they were Olympic medals, team photos covered the walls, and his old jerseys were framed and hung up like he was Babe Ruth or something. I'm not exaggerating either. My parents actually had a special cabinet installed just to store and show off all of his baseball memorabilia. Meanwhile, anything related to me barely mattered. In high school, I was really good in auto shop and even won a few awards for rebuilding engines, but you'd never know it from my house. Those awards either ended up shoved into some random drawer or maybe even thrown away. The most recognition I ever got was the occasional "that's nice" from my dad once in a while. I still remember one summer when I was 16. I spent months saving money from my gas station job to buy parts so I could rebuild this old Kawasaki engine. I worked on it nonstop all summer, and when I finally got it running, I was incredibly proud. I called my dad out to the garage so I could show him. He barely gave it a glance. He stood there for maybe 20 seconds, muttered, "That's nice, son," and then immediately asked if I'd seen Tyler's batting stats in the newspaper that morning. I mean, seriously, it was like nothing I ever did mattered. That pretty much sums up my whole childhood. My mom would spend hours cooking Tyler's favorite meals before his games, always saying she had to make sure her all-star had enough energy. But when I had a bike show or competition coming up, she'd just tell me to grab something out of the fridge. My dad would leave work early to attend every single one of Tyler's baseball games, yet somehow he was always too busy at the office when I competed in events, even when I won second place at a regional custom bike competition. Eventually, I just stopped telling them about anything I accomplished because there was no point. And the amount of money they poured into Tyler was unbelievable. Private coaches, expensive equipment, travel teams that competed all across the state. They spent thousands and thousands of dollars on his baseball career. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs during high school just to afford the tools and parts one needed for my bikes. Not once did my parents offer to help me financially with any of it. The messed up part is that I never really hated Tyler for it. He wasn't a bad kid. He was definitely spoiled and completely unaware of how unfair everything was. But sometimes I'd notice him looking uncomfortable when our parents would praise him right after ignoring something I said. Still, he never said anything about it. Why would he? From his perspective, life was pretty great. By the time I turned 18, I knew I had to get out of that house before I completely lost my mind. I'd been saving every bit of money I could, and eventually I managed to rent a tiny garage about 8 miles away from my parents' place. It was close enough that they could reach me if they ever actually cared to try, but far enough that I didn't have to witness the constant Tyler worship every single day. I built my motorcycle repair business from absolutely nothing. There was no help from my parents, no family loans, no connections. It was just me working my ass off, often 16 hours a day. For the first year, I even slept on a beat-up old cot in the back of the shop because I couldn't afford an apartment yet. It was brutally hard, but I was good at what I did. Word started spreading that I could repair and customize motorcycles better than the local dealerships, and I did it for half their prices. That little shop slowly became my entire world. My dog Max would spend the day there with me, usually napping in the sunlight near the door while I worked. For the first time in my life, I felt like I actually mattered, like I had real value. And then there was Mia. About 2 years ago, she moved into the building next door and opened this small, cozy coffee shop. The very first day, she walked over to my garage with a cup of coffee, saying it was a welcome to the neighborhood gift. "I'll wait for the next chunk." I almost dropped the wrench I was holding when she first came over. Mia was gorgeous, smart, funny, and honestly way out of my league, but for some reason she genuinely seemed to enjoy stopping by and chatting with me about bikes and engines. I won't lie, every time she came around I got these stupid butterflies in my stomach, but I kept everything friendly and professional, just normal neighborly conversation. After all, why would someone like her ever be interested in a grease-covered guy like me? My family had spent my entire life making it clear I wasn't worth much, so I just assumed she probably saw me the same way. Still, things in my life were going pretty well at that point. Business was steady, I had my dog and my shop, and at least Mia seemed happy to talk with me whenever she stopped by. For the first time, I felt like my life might finally be heading in the right direction. Then came the day, about 2 years ago, that showed me exactly where I stood with my family. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was working on a beautiful Ducati that some wealthy guy from Nashville had brought in for custom modifications. He wanted all kinds of expensive upgrades that were honestly a bit of a pain to install, but he was paying really well, so I didn't mind. Max was in his usual spot by the door, snoring like the lazy dog he is, while AC/DC blasted through my old, worn-out speakers. I was using my plasma cutter to adjust part of the frame, something I'd done countless times before. It wasn't anything complicated, but this time something went wrong. Even now, I don't know exactly what happened. Maybe the metal had some flaw, or maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention. One moment I was focused on making a clean cut, and the next there was this awful tearing sound, sparks flying everywhere, and suddenly the plasma cutter jerked violently. The blade kicked back and sliced straight into my right leg just above the knee. I remember seeing the metal glowing red hot as it cut into my flesh, and the smell of my own skin burning was something I'll never forget. I screamed so loudly that Max jumped up immediately, barking like he was ready to attack whatever had hurt me. Blood started pouring out right away, not just a slow bleed but full-on gushing with every heartbeat. I fell backward and hit my head against the concrete floor, which only made things worse. The pain was indescribable. It felt like someone had shoved my leg into a furnace and was twisting it around. I'd broken bones before, sliced my hands on engine parts, and burned myself on exhaust pipes plenty of times. But this was something completely different. "Help! Somebody help me!" I shouted, but my shop sits pretty isolated, and with the music blasting there was no way anyone nearby could hear me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grab my phone. Blood was pooling under my body fast, spreading across the shop floor like spilled paint. I could feel my heart pounding while this cold, clammy sensation spread across my body. With my fingers slick with blood and smearing the screen, I somehow managed to call my mom. When she answered, I was gasping for air, barely able to get the words out. "Mom," I choked. "I'm hurt. Really bad. The cutter, my leg. There's so much blood. I need help right now." Her response was completely calm, like I'd called to ask about dinner plans. "Derek, honey, we're kind of busy with something important right now. Can't you just call an ambulance?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, please," I begged, my voice breaking. "I'm losing too much blood. I don't think I can. I need help right now, please." I was starting to feel dizzy, and the room was spinning around me. "Just hold on, Derek. We'll get there when we can," she said, and then the line went dead. She actually hung up on me. I was lying there on the concrete floor pressing a shop rag against the wound, but it soaked through with blood almost instantly. My vision was starting to tunnel, the edges turning black. I tried dialing 911, but my fingers were too slippery with blood to hit the numbers properly. Max was completely losing it, barking, whining, and nudging my face like he was trying to keep me conscious. Smart dog. With what little strength I had left, I tried calling my mom again, but she didn't answer. Then I called my dad. Straight to voicemail. Not that I was surprised. "I'll wait for the next chunk." I tried to whisper one last prayer, but Max wouldn't stop barking, almost like he refused to let me slip away quietly. Even the afterlife apparently doesn't come without interruptions. Just as I was drifting toward what felt like the end, my phone suddenly buzzed. Tyler's name flashed across the screen. For a moment I thought maybe my parents had told him what happened and he was calling to figure out what to do. "Hey, Liam," he said when he answered, his voice loud and slurred like he'd been drinking. I could hear music and people laughing in the background. "What's up, man? Big day today." I was confused, wondering who the hell Liam was and whether I'd heard him wrong. But I still felt a small wave of relief that at least he'd answered. "Tyler," I gasped, struggling to force the words out. "Help. Accident at the shop. Bleeding bad. Need help now?" There was a brief pause, and for a second I thought maybe he hadn't heard me, but then he laughed. "Oh crap. Sorry, man. Thought you were someone else calling to congratulate me. We're celebrating my draft pick. The AA Braves just signed me. $2 million contract." In the background, I heard my mom's voice calling out, "Tyler, honey, come take a picture with the scout." I tried to say something, but my head was spinning and the words wouldn't come out. I could feel the blood continuing to spread beneath me. "Tyler," I whispered weakly, but the call had already ended. Then my dad's voice rang out somewhere in the background before the line cut completely. "That's my boy, professional baseball player. I always knew you had it in you." And there I was, lying on my shop floor bleeding out while my entire family was just 8 miles away celebrating Tyler's baseball contract. They couldn't even drive 10 minutes to help me. "Tyler, please," I murmured, but he had already hung up. My vision was fading quickly now, and the pain was starting to feel distant, replaced by this strange floating numbness. I knew enough about injuries to realize what that meant. I was going into shock, probably dying for real this time. Max's barking suddenly became even more frantic, and through my fading awareness I heard the shop door burst open. "Derek, I brought you some coffee and—" "Oh my God, Derek!" It was Mia. A second later her face appeared above me, filled with pure horror. I hated that she had to see me like that because I'd always tried to act tough and capable around her. "Derek, stay with me. Don't close your eyes," she said, already dialing 911 and shouting into the phone. "I need an ambulance now. Severe laceration, arterial bleeding, patient losing consciousness." She ripped off her belt and wrapped it tightly around my thigh, pulling it into a makeshift tourniquet. The sudden pressure sent a sharp burst of pain through me that briefly pulled me back into consciousness. "Mia," I mumbled. "Don't talk," she said quickly. "Save your strength." Her hands were covered in my blood, but she didn't hesitate for even a second. "The ambulance is coming. Just stay with me, Derek. Please stay with me." In that moment I wanted to tell her I didn't even need the ambulance because, in a way, she had already saved me just by being there. If that was the way my life ended, at least the last thing I'd see would be her face. The final thing I remember before everything went black was her tear-filled eyes and the sound of her voice repeating my name over and over. Later I learned that Max had been barking nonstop for so long that Mia eventually came over to check what was going on. If she hadn't shown up exactly when she did, I wouldn't be here telling this story. The doctor later told me I had been about 5 minutes away from bleeding out completely. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, listening to the steady beeping of monitors and breathing in that familiar antiseptic hospital smell. My leg felt like it was on fire, but at least I was alive. Mia was asleep in a chair beside my bed, her clothes still stained with my blood. Even with her messy hair and the dark circles under her eyes, seeing her there made me realize just how lucky I was that she had found me. A few hours later the doctor came in, looking serious as he held his clipboard. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. "If your neighbor hadn't found you when she did, you would have bled out within another 5 minutes. Then he cleared his throat and gave me that look doctors have when they're about to deliver bad news. "The damage to your leg was extensive. The plasma cutter severed your femoral artery and caused significant nerve and muscle damage. We managed to save the leg," he continued before pausing, clearly trying to phrase the rest carefully. "But you'll need multiple surgeries, and there's a high chance you won't regain full function. With an injury like this, it's likely you won't be able to stand for long periods again." I already knew what that meant before he even finished the sentence. It meant I wouldn't be able to work on motorcycles anymore. I finished the sentence for him, the words feeling heavy in my mouth like rocks. My whole life, my business, my sense of identity, everything I had built for myself was suddenly gone in one careless moment. I lay there trying to process it all, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do now. Just then Mia woke up and immediately came over to my side, gently taking my hand. "I was so scared," she whispered. "There was so much blood and you were so pale. I thought I was going to lose you." I forced a small smile for her. "Thanks for saving my life." She squeezed my hand softly and asked, "Have your parents been here?" I tried calling the number listed in your emergency contacts. "My parents." I just shook my head, too exhausted to get into the whole messed up story. Right then, as if perfectly timed, my phone rang. It was my dad. For a brief second, I let myself believe they might actually care enough to check on me. "Dad?" I answered, hating myself a little for still hoping. His voice came through immediately, not worried or emotional, just straight to business. "Derek, your mother and I need to borrow $25,000 for Tyler's equipment and relocation expenses for his new team." Felt like someone had punched me in the gut. No asking how I was, no concern, no mention of the accident, just another request for money for Tyler. "I'm in the hospital," I said slowly, my voice shaking because I was trying not to completely lose it. "I almost died yesterday. Where were you when I called begging for help?" There was a brief, awkward silence before he responded dismissively. "Don't be so dramatic, Derek. It was just a cut. That was it." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Just a cut?" I nearly bled to death. "The doctor said 5 more minutes and I would have died. And you were all too busy celebrating Tyler's baseball contract to even care." Mia was staring at me wide-eyed as I shouted into the phone. My dad sounded irritated, like I was wasting his time. "Look," he said, "we're sorry you got hurt, but Tyler signing that contract is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is important." "And my life isn't?" I asked, hating how pathetic I sounded. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Finally he said, "We need that money by next week." I hung up without saying another word. Then I opened my banking app and just stared at the screen. For the past 5 years, I'd been sending my parents $1,000 every month to help with their expenses. I always believed it was the right thing to do. They told me they were struggling with the mortgage, and I wanted to help. Now I understood where that money had actually been going, straight into funding Tyler's baseball career. With a few quick taps, I canceled the automatic transfer. Just like that, it was done. 5 years of sending them money I'd worked my ass off for, and they couldn't even come help when I was bleeding out. Mia sat down beside the bed again, clearly shocked. "Derek?" I couldn't help overhearing. "Did your parents really not come when you called them before I found you?" So I told her everything. I told her what it was like growing up as the forgotten son, about calling them that day while they were celebrating Tyler, about all the money I'd been sending them for years that was really meant for their golden child. By the time I finished, she looked furious. "That's not family," she said, her voice shaking. "That's not how parents are supposed to act. That's just completely messed up." She stayed with me the entire first week in the hospital, showing up every day with real food because hospital meals were terrible, helping me figure out the TV remote, and just talking with me about normal everyday things so my mind wouldn't spiral. No one had ever done something like that for me before. Then one day I got a text from Tyler. "Hey bro, heard you got hurt. That sucks. Also, did you tell mom and dad you won't help with my expenses? Not cool, man. Family helps family." I didn't even bother replying. The next day my mom called and left a voicemail. "Derek, honey, I know you're upset, but this is Tyler's big break. We really need that money. Call us back." Mia was sitting next to me when I played the message. She calmly took my phone and deleted it. "You don't need that right now," she said. Then she surprised me by taking my hand again. "You know what? I'm going to be your family now. Me and Max." The way she said it made my chest tighten in a completely different way than the pain in my leg. When she looked at me, it wasn't pity I saw in her eyes. It was something else entirely. I wasn't used to seeing that kind of look directed at me. The doctors explained that I would need at least 2 more surgeries and months of physical therapy. Meanwhile, the medical bills were already stacking up, and my terrible insurance was only covering about half of the costs. I was staring at debt that would take years to pay off, and on top of that, I couldn't even work anymore. My shop was sitting empty while I still had to pay rent on the space. One night when the weight of everything finally hit me, I looked at Mia and said, "I'm screwed. I can't work, I can't pay my bills and I can't keep my shop open. Everything I built is just gone. She squeezed my hand and calmly replied, "We'll figure it out. I'm not going anywhere." Later that night, after she had gone home, I lay awake in the hospital bed thinking about how my parents couldn't be bothered to drive 8 miles to save my life, while Mia, someone I'd known for less than 2 years, had been by my side every single day. Some family you're born with and some family you find along the way. Sometimes the family you find ends up meaning a lot more than the one you were born into. When a nurse came in to check my vitals, she noticed I was still awake and told me I should get some rest because my girlfriend could come back tomorrow. I didn't bother correcting her about Mia. For the first time since the accident, I fell asleep feeling something that almost resembled hope. The next few months were an absolute mess. Recovering from an injury like mine wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. I went from being a guy who could rebuild an entire motorcycle engine to someone who needed help just getting to the bathroom. In 2 months, I went through 3 surgeries. The first was to repair additional damage in my leg, the second was to deal with an infection that developed, and the third attempted to repair some of the nerve damage. Every time they wheeled me into the operating room, I wondered if that would be the surgery that finally fixed things. But each time I woke up, the doctors had the same careful expression on their faces. They had been right. I would never be able to stand long enough to work on bikes again, at least not the way I used to. Spending 8 or 10 hours on my feet, crouching under motorcycles, lifting heavy parts, that part of my life was over. My shop sat empty while the rent kept draining what little savings I had left. The medical bills were overwhelming. Even with insurance, I was looking at more than $80,000 in expenses, and that was after countless frustrating phone calls arguing with the insurance company. The only thing keeping me from completely falling apart was Mia. She drove me to appointments, helped me through my physical therapy exercises, and stayed late most evenings just talking with me about normal everyday things to keep my mind distracted. Her coffee shop was doing okay, and once she realized I had started skipping meals to save money, she began bringing me dinner regularly. One evening after therapy, while she was helping me back into my apartment, my leg in a brace and my weight balanced awkwardly on crutches, I finally worked up the courage to ask why she was doing all of this for me. Part of me couldn't decide if she actually liked me or if I was just some kind of pity project for a lonely loser. She looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. "Because I care about you, dummy," she said, and then she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't some perfect movie moment. I was sweaty from therapy, probably smelled like a hospital, and could barely balance on my crutches, but for the first time since the accident I felt like maybe my life wasn't completely over. She admitted she'd had a crush on me since the day she moved in next door. "I kept bringing you coffee hoping you'd ask me out," she said with a small blush. I felt like the biggest idiot alive. "I thought you were just being nice," I replied. She laughed and said, "I don't bring coffee to all my neighbors, Derek." 2 weeks later, she moved into my apartment. It happened naturally since she was already spending most nights there helping me anyway. She said it just made things more practical, though I could tell there was more to it than that. It probably should have felt strange going from neighbors to roommates to whatever we were becoming. But it didn't. Felt completely natural. And during all of this, did my family ever once call to check how I was doing? You can probably guess the answer. The only contact I got was my mom sending a text asking if I had reconsidered helping with Tyler's expenses. After that message, I blocked her number. By then, I was starting to panic about money. My savings were nearly gone, the bills kept piling up, and I still couldn't work. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with my life. My whole identity had always been tied to being a motorcycle mechanic, so if I couldn't do that anymore, what was I even qualified to do? One night, I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I finally voiced the thought out loud. "What am I going to do, Mia? I can't go back to what I used to do. I'm useless now." She propped herself up on one elbow and looked down at me like I'd said something ridiculous. "You're not useless. You're just different now. You still know more about motorcycles than anyone in this town." I let out a short laugh. "Yeah. And what good does that do me if I can't actually work on them?" She shrugged. "Then don't work on them. Teach other people how to work on them." I stared at her like she'd completely lost it. "Who the hell would want to learn from me?" She immediately shot back. "Are you kidding? That kid Jamie is always hanging around your shop asking questions. Start with him. Jamie was this 19-year-old who had been lurking around the shop for months before the accident, constantly asking about engines and bikes. He could be annoying, but he was genuinely interested. The next day I gave him a call. "You want to learn how to rebuild a carburetor?" I asked. He showed up at my apartment within an hour looking like I just handed him a winning lottery ticket. I started teaching him at my kitchen table using diagrams and small engine parts one could work on while sitting down. It wasn't anything fancy, but the kid soaked up every word. I charged him $20 per session, which wasn't much, but it was something. Jamie told a few of his friends, and before long I had 3 students, then 5. Eventually I moved the lessons to my garage so I could at least have proper tools nearby. The money still wasn't great, but it was enough to make minimum payments on my medical bills and keep the lights on. Mia watched the whole thing unfold with a quiet, satisfied smile, like she already knew it would work. One night she said, "You're actually a really good teacher. Have you ever thought about turning this into something official, like a small trade school?" I laughed the idea off at the time, but I kept it in the back of my mind. My leg still wasn't improving much though. The doctors told me I'd probably always deal with pain, a noticeable limp, and limits on how long I could stay on my feet. Some days were easier than others, but I was slowly starting to accept that this was just my new reality. About 4 months after the accident, I was finally well enough to go back to my shop. Not to work the way I used to because that part of my life was over, but to try this teaching idea properly. I set up a small classroom corner with folding chairs and a whiteboard. The main work area was still fully equipped, but now it was where my students practiced hands-on instead of where I spent all day working. By then my little program had 6 regular students, mostly guys in their late teens or early 20s who wanted to learn motorcycle repair but couldn't afford a real trade school. I charged just enough to keep the place running without making it too expensive for them. I wasn't getting rich, but between that income and Mia's help, I was managing to stay afloat. Then one afternoon, completely out of the blue, I was sitting at my desk reviewing carburetor diagrams for the next day's lesson when I heard the front door of the shop open. Mia was at the counter since she had started helping out there when she wasn't at her coffee shop. A moment later she called out to me, her voice tight, "Derek, your parents are here." My stomach instantly dropped. I hadn't seen them since before the accident. They walked in looking exactly the same as always, and neither of them even glanced at the leg brace I was wearing or the cane I now used to get around. "Derek," my dad said, getting straight to business like he always did, "we need to talk to you about something important." I didn't offer them a seat or anything. Why would I? My mom jumped in before I could respond, adjusting the expensive purse hanging on her shoulder. "Tyler is having some problems with the team. The contract had some fine print we didn't expect, and he needs to buy out part of the agreement. It's a legal issue." My dad nodded seriously. "It's going to cost about $450,000 to resolve. We've looked at every option, and the only real solution is for you to sell this place." I just stared at them, not sure if I should laugh or scream. "You want me to sell my business to bail Tyler out of a contract problem?" My mom waved her hand dismissively at the shop around us. "This place is just sitting here while you're recovering," she said, as if my entire livelihood was nothing more than clutter. They continued talking like I was the unreasonable one. Mom said I was basically hoarding the shop and that if I sold it now, the money could help Tyler, and there would still be some left for me to start something new once I got better. I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, after they left me to bleed out on my shop floor, they had the nerve to come here and ask me to give up my business for Tyler. I forced myself to stay calm and said slowly, "Let me get this straight. You want me to sell the business I built from nothing, the one I can still run even with my injury, so Tyler can get out of a contract he signed without even reading?" My dad frowned like I was the one being unreasonable. "Don't be selfish, Derek. This is your brother's future we're talking about. And stop pretending this is some real business. Teaching kids how to screw in bolts isn't a business." I nearly fell out of my chair. Selfish? Me? Before I could say anything else, Mia stepped forward from behind the counter, her eyes blazing. "Selfish? Are you serious right now?" she snapped. My parents looked at her like they had just noticed she was standing there. Mia didn't back down. "Derek almost died," she said, her voice sharp and shaking with anger. "He called you while he was bleeding out on the floor begging for help, and you ignored him because you were too busy celebrating Tyler. He's gone through 3 surgeries and might never fully recover, and neither of you bothered to visit him even once. Not once. And now you show up here asking him to give up everything he built just so Tyler can get out of another mess." The room fell completely silent, but her words hung there like a slap across the face. My mom looked offended and asked coldly, "Who are you? This is a family matter. Stay out of it." "No." I cut in immediately. "Mia is family. She's more family than either of you have ever been to me." Then I pointed straight at the door. "Get out. And don't come back." My dad's face turned bright red. "You ungrateful. Get out," I shouted, pushing myself to my feet even though my legs screamed with pain. They finally left, my dad slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Mia hurried over as I lowered myself back into the chair, my leg throbbing badly. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, taking my hand. "I shouldn't have interfered." I squeezed her hand and shook my head. "No, you said exactly what needed to be said." That night I barely slept. Not because I felt guilty, because I didn't, but because I was still stunned they had the nerve to ask me to sell my shop after everything they had done, or rather everything they hadn't done when I needed them most. The next morning I made a decision. I went to the bank and removed my parents from my emergency contact list. I called a lawyer, well technically a friend who happened to be a lawyer, and asked him to draw up a will leaving everything to Mia. I even contacted the hospital to make sure my parents were not to receive any information about me if anything happened again. I was cutting every last tie with them. About a week later Mia and I were cleaning up the shop after that day's lesson when she suddenly said, "I think we should make this official." I looked at her. "Make what official?" She gestured around the shop. The school. "Let's register it as an actual trade school. Get certifications, do it properly." I stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "That would cost a fortune. Paperwork, licenses, equipment upgrades." She just smiled. "My coffee shop is doing great. I've got savings. We could be partners." "Business partners?" I asked. She walked over and kissed my cheek. "That too." 2 weeks later, we submitted the paperwork to create Summer's Motorcycle Technical Institute, which was a pretty fancy name for what was basically me teaching kids in my old shop, but Mia insisted it needed to sound professional. The funny thing is that my entire life I had tried to get my parents to notice me, to be proud of what I was doing. Now that I was finally building something meaningful, something that might actually succeed, I realized I didn't care whether they ever knew about it or not. Their opinions simply didn't matter anymore. That night, while Mia and I were celebrating with takeout, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Tyler, the first time I had heard from him since that "family helps family" message. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. They might lose the house because of my contract situation. Can you help?" I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about all the years I had put up with their nonsense and the way they were still trying to twist everything around. Even after everything, they still had the nerve to ask me for help and try to guilt-trip me into it. I typed back, "You're my brother, but none of you acted like family when I was bleeding out on the floor. I've got a real family now. Good luck with your baseball career." Then I blocked his number too. Mia came up behind me and wrapped her arms around me. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, actually, I think I am." For the first time, I felt completely at peace with my decision. They had made their choice a long time ago, and now I had finally made mine. Later on, I heard through an old high school friend that my parents ended up losing the house anyway. After spending everything they had on Tyler's contract buyout, they couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. Apparently, they moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. My dad had to come out of retirement and take a job at the local hardware store, and my mom started working part-time at a department store. Karma, I guess. Whenever I start to feel a little bad for them, I remember lying on the floor of my shop watching my own blood pool around me while they were popping champagne for Tyler, and that sympathy disappears pretty quickly. As for Tyler, his baseball career collapsed just as dramatically. After all that money spent fixing his contract issues, he showed up to training camp out of shape and with a serious attitude problem. The team warned him several times before finally cutting him after just one season. The last I heard, he was working as an assistant coach at some small-town high school, still talking about how close he came to going pro. The golden child eventually had to face reality that he wasn't special, just spoiled. Sometimes I wonder if he ever realized how much our parents sacrificed for him and how little they ever cared about me. It's been 3 years now since all of this happened. Mia and I got married last spring in a small ceremony with just our close friends and her family. Our motorcycle school is now fully certified and has a waiting list that stretches 2 months long, and we're even thinking about opening a second location. My leg still gives me trouble and I'll probably always walk with a limp, but I've learned how to work around it. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat with phantom pain shooting through my leg and memories of that day flooding back. But Mia is always there beside me, holding me until I fall asleep again. My old family may have left me to die, but the family I built afterward gave me a reason to keep living, and honestly that's more than enough for me. So I'm curious, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have cut them off like I did or tried to forgive them? Sometimes I still wonder if I made the right decision, but then I look at everything I've managed to build from the ashes of that day and think maybe it was the only choice I could have made. And for anyone asking, Max is still doing great. He's older and lazier these days, but he's still the best shop dog around.